All right. Good morning, committee. We'll go ahead and get started this morning. I know that some members may be coming in a little bit later due to the slick road conditions and the weather. Are there any bill introductions this morning? I do have a bill introduction. The RS number is 23 RS 0919. And that is an act concerning agriculture relating to the farm tenancies requiring a third party that causes damage to crops or land to notify the landowner of such damage and request confirmation of existing tenants of such land. So that is the bill introduction, seconded by Representative Hoffman. All those in favor of the bill introduction say aye. Aye. Opposed? Bill is introduced. Any further bill introductions this morning? Oh, all right. Representative Landwehr is going to be working on a bill. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the budget report outs by Chairman Hoffman with the general government budget. And I believe he is going to start with the Board of Barbering. Chairman Hoffman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, let's start with the Board of Barbering. It is on page 609 in volume 1. And their analysis starts on 613. So the agency submitted a revised estimate of $193,348, all from the Board of Barbering Fee Fund and 1.9 FTE positions. This is an expenditure increase of $9,000 and a 1.3 FTE position decrease from the amount approved by the 22 legislature. The expenditure increase is due to the agency's supplemental request for payments to computer-based testing vendors due to the increase in the number of examinations being administered and to address rising fuel prices. The agency anticipates an increase in inspections in 2023 and requests additional funding for the gasoline. The decrease in FTE positions is due to the consolidation of 2 part-time positions. The governor concurred with the agency's 23 and the House Budget Committee concurred with the governor's recommendation.
Are there any discussions in regards to fiscal year 2023? All right, see none, we may move on to 2024.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2024 agency requests $197,899, all from the Board of Barbering Fee Fund and 1.9 FTE positions. That's an increase of $4,551 above the agency's 2023 revised estimate. That increase is primarily due to ongoing vendor expenditures for administering the barbering examinations and increased travel and healthcare, the group healthcare insurance. Increase for testing gasoline expenditures are to address the issues mentioned in 23 supplemental request. The House committee, or the governor concurred or recommended their budget, and the House concurred with the governor.
All right, committee, are there any questions in regards to fiscal year 2024? Seeing none, you may move on to 2025.
All right, 2025, agency request 202, 404, all from the Barber Fee Fund, and expenditures and 1.9 FT positions. The increase is $4,555 above agency's request. It's attributable to vendor expenditures for administering the barber exam, gasoline, and increased travel. Again, it's the same wording as before as far as what their expenditure and traveling issue is. The governor concurred. The committee concurred.
All right. Any questions in regards to 2025? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I haven't looked it up in the book yet, but was there any attention paid to the fee funds that, as I recall, were dwindling pretty good?
Chairman Hoffman.
Yes, there was. And actually, we heard a bill and passed it out 2 days ago, I think it was, that would give them some more flexibility. It increases the statutory limit on some of their fees, but it also helps them out with this issue of the testing. One of the biggest things is what right now they moved to a computer-based testing, which is costing them more to administer it. And so with what they could charge for the test, most of it was going for the actual test and not for them to actually administer the test. And so the bill will help with that, and it also will give them a senior license, ability to give someone a senior license. So if they're 65, if you've got a barber that's 65 or older, doesn't want a barber anymore but doesn't want to give up their license, they can pay a fee and keep that license. And then within, I think it's 5 years within that time period, or 3 years, one or the other, if they want to come back, then they pay another fee and they can start barbering again, but yet they don't have to go through all the other stuff. So, but those changes should help their fee fund and get it more stabilized if we pass that bill.
Representative Sutton.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Representative
Mr. Chair.
Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is one that we always seem to get a lot of discussion, and I don't want to necessarily cause discussion. This is the first time I've ever seen gasoline, assuming gasoline prices are going to go up or they're traveling more. But is part of this vendor, this electronic testing, is the contract, does it go up every year? I guess I find it interesting if barbering is as hot as tech jobs, that they keep increasing more tests every year, or is the agreement they have kind of like we did with some of the leasing of state office buildings years ago, that as you go, the rent goes up?
Chairman Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think the rate is going up, but they did indicate that they are seeing a kind of a surge in the number of barbers that are coming in, and they're looking to probably test more every year than what they have been testing. So,
Excuse me.
Representative Rogers.
You have to do a test every year, though?
No, new
electronic
barbers.
test?
New barbers
Okay.
every year.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Any further questions in regards to the budget for the Board of Barbering? All right, seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the adoption of fiscal year 23, 24, and 25 for the Board of Barbering.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Hoffman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now to the Board of Cosmetology. And we did not discuss, well, we kind of joked a little bit about putting the two together, but we did not discuss that too far. But I will say, though, before I get into it, we did talk to, because we had the Board of Barbering and the Board of Cosmetology there at the same time. We did talk to them quite a little bit about, we're seeing more and more salons, I call them salons, but or whatever, establishments that have dual license. So you've got people in there that have cosmetology license and barbering license, and we kind of gave them a little bit of a challenge to try to work out more of a way to have dual inspections, so that you didn't have the Board of Barbering send an inspector and then maybe a week later the cosmetology send an inspection and probably doing almost the same inspection. So they said that was something that they would work on, so we'll see what happens and kind of push them next year on it. But so anyway, that's just a little side note. So the Board of Cosmetology submitted a revised estimate of $1.2 million from the cosmetology fee fund and 14 FTE positions. It's the same amount approved by the 2022 Legislature. Governor concurred. The Budget Committee concurred.
Any questions in regards to 2023? If not, we'll move on to 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agency requested $1.2 million from the cosmetology fee fund expenditures and 15 FTE positions for 2024. This is an increase of $44,157 and 1 FTE position above the 23 revised estimate. The increase is primarily attributed to the agency's enhancement requests for additional staffing. These include a part-time facility inspector to conduct routine annual inspections, all from licensed establishments, and a part-time senior assistant to assist the agency's enforcement department. With increasing caseloads, they asked for these requests, and these would be ongoing expenditures. The governor concurred with the agency, but we did not completely concur We left in the inspector, but we deleted the, deleted 17,177, all from special revenue funds, and the .5 FT position for the part-time senior administrative assistant. We felt like that they are seeing a lot more facilities. Cosmetology is it's interesting how it's kind of growing. I mean, everybody thinks of cosmetology as hair, but it's, tattoos, nails, all kinds of different piercings. Yeah. The weaving now, and they're even braiding is kind of becoming a huge deal. So anyway, there's more inspections. They said that they were only able to get to like 31% of the salons this last year. So we let them have the .5 and the money, but we took out the senior administrative assistant.
Committee, any discussion on fiscal year 2024? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This isn't with regards to the budget at all. We actually regulate braiding. Is that
Chairman
true?
Hoffman.
It's not, but it's something in the cosmetology industry that's becoming bigger.
Okay.
We don't regulate it yet, though.
Okay,
Well,
good.
Off
it
your
came
board,
up.
yes.
It's something I think that they
Let's
would
try to
like
avoid it. What do
Yeah,
you
I know.
say?
I'm not advocating for it, but it's something that they brought up. So
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any further discussion on fiscal year 2024? All right, seeing none, move on to 2025.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agency requested $1.2 million, all from the cosmetology fee fund, and expenditures are in 15 FT positions. It's an expenditure increase of $227 or $277 above the agency's 24 request, and it's attributed to the additional staff from the 2024. The governor concurred with their request. Our budget committee, we did the same thing. We took out that .5 FT position and the funding for the senior administrative assistant.
Committee, any questions in regards to 2025? Seeing none, Chairman Hoffman. Oh, Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I noticed that it says at the end that this position would be part of the agency's enforcement department. How large of a part of the agency's enforcement department would that .5 FTE be?
Chairman Hoffman.
That is a good question. Hold on. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, we didn't really talk about it because they just have their FTEs in administration. So I don't know if it's what.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ousley.
And I'll just, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just assume that the committee felt like they still had an enforcement department capable of the workload required.
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, they didn't really talk about the administrative assistant position. Most of what I saw was the facility inspector that they talked about the most. So,
Representative Ousley.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification. It reads a little different, but okay. So they're going to delete the 17,000, all from special revenue funds, and delete the 5/10 position for the agency's enhancement request for a part-time senior, and this position would be part of the agency. So they're going to delete that too, right?
Chairman Hoffman.
yeah, I think that was the former representative's point. He was asking if that .5 was their only position for enforcement, and I don't know. I mean, they never said that they didn't have an enforcement position. They just said they
Okay, maybe
had
I'm
the
asking.
senior administrative assistant that they wanted. I think it appears to me that this would be someone who would probably be more shuffle in what came in, and senior administrative assistant, but, so we're not deleting it twice, we're just deleting it 24 and 25, the same position.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I didn't answer my question, I didn't ask my question the right way. I realize that they're deleting it, but what I'm trying to figure out here is this position would be part. You see, that language kind of indicates that's strange, so maybe it's just the language. But my other question would be, is this agency having problems with their fee fund? Do they have enough money in their fee fund? Because they seem to be deleting it off from that, and so it makes me wonder if that's another problem.
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, their fee fund has stayed fairly consistent since 2020. The last I have, it's $513,000 in 20, and under the Gov's rec, it would be $478,000 in 2025. But actually, under ours, it would be probably right around $500,000.
Okay, that answers my
yeah,
question.
and they do have 4 senior administrative assistants.
Representative Ballard.
I'm fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion in regards to fiscal year 2025? Seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the adoption of fiscal year 2023, 2024, and 2025 of the Cosmetology Board.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Hoffman, you may now move on to the Office of the Governor.
Okay. Office of Governor would be in page 69, same volume. We will start. Their analysis starts on 2023. The agency submitted a request estimate of $448,000 or $448 million, including $29.4 million of SGF and 58.8 FTE positions in 23. That's a decrease of $10.8 million from funding sources, including $86,000 from SGF, or 0.3%, below the 23 approved. The all funds decrease is largely due to decreased expenditures for contractual services in the Office of Recovery, as the work for the advisory panel continues to narrow its focus as those programs continue to draw down. Decrease is partially offset by increased federal funds for several of the governor's grant programs, including the Crime Victims Assistance Grant and Family Violence Prevention Service Act. And then it also lists, I'm not going to go through these, but this also lists some of the grants through ARPA that have come through the governor's office. It includes 58 or 54.8 FT positions. That's a decrease of 14 FT positions below the 23 approved number of 68.8 due to decreasing staffing in the Office of Recovery. Surprisingly enough, the governor concurred with herself on the budget, and but the governor also must have forgot something, so she added something to her budget. But anyway, I'm just kidding. The governor recommends transferring $220 million SGF to the Office of Governor's new infrastructure leveraging fund to finance matching funds to communities for competitive grants through fiscal year 2027. No expenditures from the ILF are reflected in the 23 budget. In addition, the governor recommends transferring $50 million SGF to the Office of Governor in 2023 to be used as state matching for federal funds. These will allow state agencies to apply for future grant programs that require state matching. The Budget Committee concurred with the governor's recommendation in 2023 with the following adjustments. Deleting the transfer of $50 million from the SGF to the Office of Governor in fiscal year 23 to be used as matching grants for agencies applying for federal grant programs that require state matching funds. And then we also added language requiring any expenditures from the governor's infrastructure leveraging fund be approved by the State Finance Council prior to being released in the fiscal year 2023. The State Finance Council would review applications as they are received. Infrastructure Leveraging Fund will finance matching funds for communities from the federal bipartisan infrastructure law for formula and competitive grant programs. Some of the potential projects are broadband initiative, energy programs, cybersecurity, water systems, and other competitive grants. And we also, when we did the write-up, this was really fast. We did this, we actually did this in yesterday. So the staff worked really quick to get this done. But in the write-up here, it says to add language allowing the State Finance Council to meet during the legislative session on this matter. I would actually like to make a motion to strike that that last sentence, because that wasn't the intent. If we're meeting, I think the legislature should meet and on these issues, not the Finance Council. So that would be my motion on that, to strike that last sentence.
So that is a formal motion.
Yes, it is.
All right, is there a second? Second by Representative Kincannon. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The wording on the Finance Council, is that by a majority vote? Because I think, doesn't she have the right to veto anything the Finance Council does?
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, this is the standard wording, I think, that's been used on all I'm not sure we can put any wording in there that would change the ability of the.
Well, it has to be a majority vote in order to pass through.
Well, but yeah, if it's reviewed, I guess that would be the assumption that it would have to pass through the State Finance Council. Jill, does this? Yeah, she does have veto authority.
The governor does have veto authority on the State Finance Council.
But this language does require a vote of the State Finance Council.
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, I think this language would require them to vote. So yeah, but the governor does have veto power on the State Finance Council.
Representative Francis.
Not to get into the weeds and drag this thing out, but it seems like to me she's got veto authority of anything they want to pass. If it comes to the State Finance Council, she probably wants it to pass since it's her agency doing the recommendation. So I would think it works like you want it to work.
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the intent was just not to put $220 million in there and not have any sort of oversight at all. This will allow our legislative leaders, along with the governor, to look at each one of these projects and decide, whether it's something that they want to do or not. So,
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Ballard. All right. Seeing no further discussion, Chairman Hoffman.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We're back on the budget as amended. Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question with number one, deleting the 50 million. What was the?
Is your mic on?
Thank you. I have a question about number one, deleting the 50 million that was transferred from SGF. What was the discussion around that, since we know that a lot of agencies apply for federal grants and many of them are matching?
Chairman Hoffman.
That is exactly true, but I've been on appropriations quite a while. You've been on it longer than I have.
And that is true.
That's true. I don't think I ever remember the governor's grant office coming in and asking for a certain amount of money to be set aside for agencies to apply for grants. If an agency applies for a federal grant, they will come back and they'll put that in their supplemental budget next year, and we'll look at it then in our as we deliberate, and we'll put that funding in for the match. I don't think there's any need for us to have a $50 million setting out there for match when it's going to go through the process. We'll match it if we have to.
Representative Ballard.
I understand what you say, but you said they could enter it in their budget and come back next time. Sometimes if the grant, let's just say, for instance, if I get a proposal in order to write the grant, it may say that I have to have this done by May 31st. And then you have to be able to identify where your matching funds might be. Next year might be too late for me to apply for this grant.
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, I never, again, going back to my, what I remember experience on, I don't ever remember agencies coming in to us and saying, we weren't able to get this grant because we didn't have a matching funds available. If they apply, they'll say where they're going to get their matching funds. And so I just don't think that this pot of money is needed for them to do what they've been doing for years. I think over the last 2 or 3 years with COVID, we've kind of got into this mentality of, oh, the federal government's going to send us all this money. We're going to try to match it, so we need to have this money available. We're already doing that in the tune of $220 million for the bipartisan. I was a little apprehensive of that, but went ahead, I added that language just simply to give it more. But the 50 million, I just don't think it's needed.
Well, and if I may interject, Representative Ballard, I would say that the $220 million with the bipartisan infrastructure bill has more specifics on what it's going to be used for. And we'll have a discussion about that with the Department of Transportation later on exactly what that money can be used for. I am wondering, the $50 million, what is the intended purpose? I mean, is it just completely vague?
So yeah, all we have is what was in her write-up. The governor recommends transferring $50 million to SGF, to the Office of Governor, to be used as state matching for federal funds. These will allow state agencies to apply for future grant programs that require state matching funds.
So no specifics.
No specifics.
On what this money would be used for. All right.
Okay.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you. That was where I was going. So I just wondered, was it due to the fact that you did not have the specifics about how the money would be used? And as you said, you hadn't seen it done this way before. So I'm questioning it, but I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I just needed to know that because I do know that so many grants require matching, and you have to be able to have a source right away. So that was
But I would contend with the chairman that we've been doing this for years and not had this fund set up for $50 million for matching grants. Agencies and departments have been doing this for quite some time. So I would question the $50 million that's set aside for the purpose of matching funds for federal grants. I don't think it's needed.
I'm fine. I have the answers that I needed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Landwehr.
Mr. Chairman, we've had a lot of discussions, I think, on these ARPA funds since the session started. And I know what the legislature passed in 22. I understand that. Unfortunately, I wish that some of us had understood it just a little bit deeper than what we did. This is a lot of money to hand over on an authority. Is there any reason why we couldn't, at this time, pull that money out and have this discussion between now and omnibus more in depth and get more detail on what's actually happening with these funds? Because the angst that I'm feeling on this is just keeps growing every day, that we've relinquished one office basically to delegate hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think the legislature needs to have more say in it. Is there any reason why we couldn't do that?
I would have to check with the revisor's office, but we authorized the State Finance Council to approve the remaining amount of ARPA. That was done in December. So the money has technically been dispersed. There's absolutely no question, and we can actually have an analysis done on what has been approved, and then obviously the legislature can question the approval of those dollars and what they went to. The $220 million, or are you talking about ARPA funds?
Well, this is ARPA funds.
Do what?
This is ARPA funds.
The 220 million?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
The 233.4 million? The 73 point, am I on the wrong budget? I'm on
No, you're on the
23.
right budget, but you're talking about what was approved in fiscal year 2022.
I understand that, but has this physically been dispersed, or is it just sitting in buckets in the agencies? If it's sitting in buckets
the
in the agencies,
200
then I don't think there's any reason why this legislature can't say, whoa, let's take a look at this,
That has been dispersed.
to entities out there.
Yes. That has been dispersed. The 233.4 million, is that what you're referencing to?
Well, it says, using ARPA funds to be utilized as follows. It doesn't say it has been dispersed, Mr. Chairman.
The 233.4, the 73.1, 20 million, the 50 million, and the 20 million for rural housing has been dispersed.
To entities.
Yes,
Can we get a list of all of those, please?
we can.
So anything that hasn't been dispersed, we could take and put that off for discussion omnibus. I know there's $66 million sitting over at KDAD's right now. I've only been able to discover one of the programs. The agency has not come back yet with the list of what's in that $66 million. The program that I've discovered is the DO school in Wichita, which I'm trying to understand why they need more infrastructure money when they've already gotten every tax opportunity that they could get from the community and the state. Now they're asking for more money. They're already up and running. Something's not right, Mr. Chairman, with this money being spent right. And we handed over oversight. And if there's any way at all, for us to pull this back so we can take another look at it, we really need to do that in this committee.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Is there a second?
However,
on the
Jill
motion?
figures out how to write that.
Is there a second? Second by Representative Rogers. Discussion on the motion, and I think Jill is crafting the language right now.
She's good at that.
Representative Helgerson.
Well, this is a question for the reviser then. As I understand, that money was committed in, by the Finance Council or the LCC to them in a regular meeting. And once it's been committed, it is in the agency's hand. Now, do we have the authority to cut the federal funds and withdraw them if they've been pledged for projects to the various agency?
Jill.
So I think there's two questions there. If the money has not been encumbered and is sitting in the state treasury, if you, as the legislature, act and the governor signs the bill that says, stop this expenditure, then yes, you will have stopped that expenditure. But I believe if it's been encumbered as a agreement between two parties, I think you will struggle to find a way to get that back. But if it is unencumbered and in the treasury, and those, like you pass the bill and the governor acts, like this action right now, it does not carry the force of law because it's House Appropriations acting. And an agency might reflect on that and not encumber something. I don't know the answer to that question, but, and then can you stop, if there's a no limit fund, so an agency has gotten federal money in a no, and it's a no limit fund. If it's a limitation on a fund, that they can only spend up to $10. If they got $10, or excuse me, if they got $12 from the feds, and it only can, if the fund only can, you can only spend $10, then they could only spend 10, and the 2 would be in there. But if it's a no limit fund and they've legally gotten federal money, then they can spend it.
Representative Helgerson.
Well, the question is then, are the funds encumbered that we're referencing right now? Because it was my understanding that those funds had already been encumbered.
Jill.
So we would have to look in the system. So that would be a research question. They would have to look in the system and see if they're officially encumbered.
Representative Helgerson.
That's fine for now.
Representative Landwehr.
Well, and I think the reviser hit on the key word, and it's unencumbered. I understand if it's already out, I get that. But if it's unencumbered, we need to take another look at this. And I have never in all my years seen such a big backdoor deal that was handled by 3 individuals that has put us in this position, and this is wrong.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Helgerson.
First, I'm not sure who you're referencing by the big backdoor deal and who the 3 individuals. Now, you can tell me now or you can tell me later what you're referencing, huh? No, I really don't. And that's my question. And, you know, I had this, you know, we had all this conversation last year. And I don't agree with that we passed our responsibility over in this whole process. But I don't know if we can go back and change the rules if they've been given. And I don't know if this is the only pot of money, if there are other parts of money that we can go back and look at. And if the maker of the motion is looking at just this pot that's recommended in the governor's, we should be looking at saying we should find out what the full list is and whether or not the money is out or not out.
Representative Landwehr.
And I think you're right, Representative Helgerson. This should be more, we can, as the chairman calls it, a global issue in all of our budgets of any funds that are not encumbered. And that doesn't mean that all of a sudden the agencies go out today and they decide to encumber these funds to override this discussion that we're having today. We're either partners in this. As legislators, we are closer to the voters than anyone in elected office in the legislature. And we have a fiduciary responsibility. We handed it over. I'm ashamed that I was a part of it, Representative Helgerson. I cannot believe that I did not catch this last year. And yes, I recall some of your conversations, but there's times that we get in here and we get so focused on all the different things that we're trying to handle that we miss pieces. And this is one that I missed. And I'm very, very, concerned that we abdicated our authority. We should not do this. Let's see if we can't get at least some of this back on track so that we can explain to the people where these hundreds of millions of dollars have actually gone and that we know that they're actually being utilized, how and where they are supposed to be.
Representative Helgerson.
I think we're on the same page. So I'm going to try a substitute motion. And the substitute motion is that not only do we look here, but we ask for a global review of all of the funds and whether or not they're encumbered or not encumbered. So we look at not only this 1 or 2 items, but all of them across the board. And they report back, well, I'd prefer it yesterday or today, but and pending that, if the committee wants to hold this funds out until omnibus, I can understand that. But then we look at everything to see what's out there.
All right, there is a substitute motion. Could you clarify, ranking member, what everything is?
Yeah, I'm being asked to hold it by another member.
So do you withdraw your motion?
For the moment.
For the moment.
All right, the motion has been withdrawn. Representative Landwehr, back on the motion.
I believe what you're asking for is what I did take and agree to, and of course it would be up to my second to follow along with that, because it would be then we don't have to do a substitute motion, is that we do make it global, looking at all, not just in this one budget. It's something I should have done earlier in the session. It didn't happen. But today I've got a little more free time because I got a lot of bills out yesterday. Is my second in agreement?
Concur.
I was going to say, it seemed very similar to your original motion, which what Representative Helgerson was wanting to draft. So I took it as being very similar to yours.
Okay, leave it alone. All right.
Any further discussion? Representative Ballard.
I understand the motion, however, it does appear to me, this was a discussion we had last year, and maybe it didn't go the way some people wanted it. So now we're going to revisit it again. I mean, because of that. I understand that's the procedure. You know, it's like if I didn't get it last year and I'm still having, you know, heartburn about it, I'll come back and we'll kind of work it out. If that's the motion, that is fine. So that is the motion. But I still think, I won't tell you what I think, but I think, privately, but I think we can live with that. But I think the issue is, even when we decide on something and we think we have it, you know, later, we want to go revisit it again. We can revisit it, but I think it should be done in such a way that it doesn't disrupt the rest of the process that has to go forward. So that's all I'll say about that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Landwehr.
Well, and I believe Representative Ballard, you and I have worked together long enough. We're on the same page. If it's already been encumbered, it's not touched, because we don't renege on what's already been out there. But if it's not encumbered, then we take another look at, and maybe every bit of it's justified. But I think as legislators in the Appropriations Committee, we should have this opportunity to look at it more clearly and verify that it's where it's supposed to go and how it should go. So we're on the same page with it. I'm not going to mess with anything that's been already encumbered, only unencumbered.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what exactly we're talking about in terms of the funding. Are we talking about funding that goes through the Spark Committee that has yet to be allocated or approved? Are we talking about money that's in the base program? To what breadth are we talking about funds and for what fiscal year?
I can't speak for Representative Landwehr, but my intention of what the motion does is the money that was dispersed but not yet allocated out. Is that correct? Yes, with the Spark money. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know, for example, in my district, there was money appropriated by the legislature in last year's budget for housing, some housing projects as it relates to workforce. So it's been a rough year in terms of interest rates going up and still dealing with the cost of materials and things like that. So there's been a request for proposal by the Salina entities for some of these housing projects. However, that hasn't been finalized yet. So would that project be subject to this possible request?
No, it would not, because that was actually encumbered in the budget bill. I think what Representative Landwehr is talking about is the amount of money that was approved by the State Finance Council in December that has not yet been dispersed. So if it was specifically mentioned in the budget bill in the legislative session of 2022 as the project in Salina was, that would not be subject to this motion. Correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the clarification. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Landwehr, you may close.
Close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're back on the budget, I believe, for fiscal year 2023. I do have a question in regards to the ARPA funds. I don't want to belabor the point, but we show on the budget for the governor, there was $385 million in federal ARPA money, and the State Finance Council approved $374. What is the remaining $11 million? So you have 385 here, but we approved 274 in State Finance Council. Where is that 11? Got clarification. Two separate numbers. That was what was approved last year, and is not in concurrent with the 374 that was approved by the State Finance Council. Any further discussion in regards to fiscal year 2023? All right, seeing none, Chairman Hoffman, you may move on to 2024.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agency requests $43.4 million from all funds, including $16.5 million SGF and 58.8 positions for 2024. That's a decrease of $404.8 million from all funds and $12.9 million SGF, below the 23 estimate. The all funds is due to ARPA funds expenditures in 2023 and not in 2024. In October of 2022, the Office of Recovery estimated that there is approximately $374 million in unallocated ARPA funds as of the time of this budget submission. The SPARC Executive Committee has made high-level recommendations, and we know that that's already been done. The all funds decrease was also due to $9.2 million decrease below the 2023 amount in federal funds for the VOCA grant program. The SGF decrease is primarily due to $20 million SGF in the budget for rural housing revolving loan program being transferred to the budget of the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation in 2024. It was also partially offset by the agency's enhancement request for additional $7.5 million to provide grant funds through the Kansas Governor's Grant Program to domestic violence and sexual assault programs. The enhancement request will partially offset a decrease in federal funding through Federal Victims of Crime Act Victim Assistance, VOCA, grant program, a program that provides direct service to victims of crime responding in their immediate emotional and physical needs, as well as supporting in them navigating the criminal justice system. The governor recommended $44 million from all funds source, $17.8 million SGF. This is an all funds increase of $658, including $1.4 million above the agency. It's increased due to increased salaries and wages expenditures in the governor's office to fund an additional 6 FT positions and increase SGF expenditures in the governor's grant program to replace the annual transfer from the problem gaming and additions grant fund with SGF fund money. So before I go into what the budget committee did, I want to explain the 6 FTE positions. Those are not 6 new FTE positions. Sometime in the past, and this is back, my understanding is back in Sebelius, when Sebelius was governor, and it's been carried on through multiple governors since, including until now. Those 6 FTE positions have been shared as far as who it says is paying for them has been shared for by other agencies. So you might have their chief attorney might be being paid part-time through one agency and another agency, and they actually don't even show up on the governor's budget as FTE. I don't know if they show up in another budget or it's kind of a little bit convoluted and complicated. So what they've asked us to do is basically to bring those 6 FTEs into the governor's office totally, so that from now on in future, when the governor's office will see that those FTEs are the governor's, and so they're not new people, they're already employed. It's just a kind of changing the way it's being looked at in the accounting system. So that's transparency, yeah. But the best way I can explain what it is, it's something that's been going on for quite a while, and so they're coming from all different agencies, and I asked if we could get a listing. I think it may take a little while. If we could actually get a listing of where each one of them was being paid for, and I think they're still working on that. I think it's pretty convoluted as far as who is how it's being done, but anyway, that's what that part is. The governor also asked for, let's see here, is this the one? Let me go to my 2024. There was quite a few moving parts in this one, so I want to make sure I got it. Yeah. So the VOCA fund, which is the Victims of Crime Act Victim Assistance Grant, it's a federal fund. We've been receiving it for years. It reached its height about, I don't know, about maybe 8 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. And it's kind of steadily been going down. The federal government is working on trying to reallocate certain monies to maybe reinitiate that fund to rebuild it. But they're looking at around $9 million less coming from that grant fund than has been coming in the past. So what the governor did is took $5.4 million into SGF for the domestic violence and sexual assault program, $1.8 million for child advocacy centers, and $250,000 for CASA grant in order to try to make them whole as far as, and it doesn't completely make them whole, but it comes close to the amount that they think that they're going to lose in that VOCA Victims Fund. All indication is most people feel like that VOCA fund's going to come back, but it's going to be a couple of years before it really gets back up. So that's what that's where that is. So if you look on page, what page is that? That's page 76. 1, 2, and 3 is basically a transfer, or is basically a switch from number 5, and so you'll see number 5 money coming out of all funds, and then 1, 2, and 3 money going in from SGF. And then there was an ask for 4 new FTE positions in the commissions on disability and minor affairs. So you got African Affairs Commission, the Tribal Commission, I think, or I'm not sure that's what it's called, but there's 4 of them that are the minority and disability affairs commissions. So they were asking for a, let's see here, what they called it. It was I think it's just administrative assistant, a full-time administrative assistant for each one of those commissions, and with the liaison program. So, and actually, in discussing this with the governor's office, to anticipate Representative Helgerson's question, we cut some of those positions, but they're okay with that. They feel like they'll be okay. So that's the main changes in their budget. I'll go into the what we did. I'll skip the first one and go to the second one. That's the same language as what we had in 2023 for the $220 million SGF for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And I'll make a motion to delete that language. That's the last part of that also, and when I get done here. We deleted 113,155 SGF and 2 FTE positions in the commissions on disability affairs for 2024. They'd requested, like I said, 4, but they said that they can give 2, so they'll basically be splitting 1 person between two of those commissions, and they felt like that would work fine. And then our committee added $2 million SGF to distribute to the Domestic Violence and Assault Programs Fund through the Governor's Grant Program. We added $400,000 SGF to the Child Advocacy Program funded through the Governor's Grant Fund, and $120,000 SGF to the Court-Appointed Special Advocacy Program funded through the Governor's Grant Program. Those are in addition to what it shows in 1, 2, and 3. They had asked for $10 million, and we didn't do near that, but we did give them just a little bit. So, number 7 is a transfer of $375,000 from the white collar Crime Fund to the Fraud and Abuse Criminal Protection Fund in the Office of Attorney General. That language is basically just truing up what we did in the Attorney General's office, just to make those funds go where they need to go as far as what we did there. If we go back to number 1, this was an addition from the committee, and I didn't really like it, but anyway, it passed. They rolled me. So they transferred $50 million from the SGF to the state matching for state matching funds for fiscal year 24. And added language that the funds be approved by the State Finance Council, and that the Office of Governor report on the use of these funds in the House Committee on Appropriations and House General Government Committee on January 31st, 2024. So this is basically moving that $50 million from 23 to 24. So with that, and I'll go ahead and make a motion to delete that, add language allowing State Finance Council to meet during the legislative session on this matter.
All right, we're on the motion, seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion, which is the same that we had in fiscal year 2023. Seeing no discussion, Chairman Hoffman, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, so back to number 1. Again, in the conversation that we had in 2023, there's no specifics on what the money is going to be added or used for. So why, I guess my next question, I have 2 questions. So one, again, it was added again in 2024 with no specifics. And then 2, is the intention for this to be an annual allocation? Chairman Hoffman.
I hope not. But again, I made my voice very clear in the committee, and it passed. So.
Well, I'm just afraid that we're going down
I
a
agree.
road where this is going to be asked for year after year after year, and we don't even know what the specifics are going to be used for this funds. Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And I think it just amounts to yet another slush fund, like the Spark dollars that were, when all the subcommittees were ignored, and then now everybody has to resubmit for the Spark dollars for under the base grants. And so I'd make a motion to just go ahead and remove this so that we can stop it before it gets too far.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Sutton. Discussion on the motion. Representative Helgerson.
Well, as I remember the discussion when they brought this up and we had the briefing, this was to, and Mr. Chairman, I believe you also had a hearing from the Secretary of Department of Transportation about this part of the program and the $220 million, and that was, this is for the state share of the matching program where those agencies don't have the additional funds to put the match together. So we're basically funding, both sides, the match and the rest of the request. I guess I'd raised the question when we had the hearing. First, is this a loan program or is this a giveaway program? And if it was an annual appropriation, I had the same questions when I can't remember who was it that briefed us on this. Because I don't know if we can sustain the $50 million or if it's going to be embedded in some other agency such as Department of Transportation. So I think that there are a lot of issues that need to be answered. I'm not saying we're not to support your motion, but I'm saying it's much more than that. But I will mention one thing, and I've heard this from both sides of me in the last hour or 2 hours. We keep referring to this as a slush fund and that the current governor may have used this. I take some exception because, this is not only going to be, this is policy that we're setting, not only for this governor, but for the upcoming many years to come. I don't like giving the governor office the opportunity to have unlimited, or even if it's limited, funds available without the legislative input, discussion, and final approval in many ways. And we have gone down that track in the last several years. And I can give you a lot more examples. So I think it's good that we pull this back, but I think we should be looking at all of the agencies and say, what's better policy for us, for the legislature, when it comes to funding and financing? So I'm not opposing his motion. I'm just saying it's bigger, it's much bigger than just this one fund.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you. I think the big difference I see in number one is that we said we did not have the information. That's why I specifically asked we did not have information. What I see here is add language that funds to be approved by the use of the state finance before being released, and that the Office of Governor provide a report on the use of these funds to the House Committee on Appropriations and House General Government. So in this case, before that money is released, we will know what it is being spent for. So that's the difference between 23 and 24. And I will vote against this amendment.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Tarwater, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I couldn't agree with the ranking member anymore. These decisions need to be made by the people in this room, by the people in Ways and Means, and by the 165 of us on the floors. So I would close my motion. Thank you.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. We're back on the budget as amended. Representative Helgerson.
You know, I had the opportunity of stopping in to your hearing, and the discussion about the loss of federal funds to many of these not-for-profits was, you know, tear-jerking. You know, it's real emotional. It raised, though, a question. I don't know if the subcommittee had chanced. Was this projected and expected from last year's discussion, or was this a sudden cutback from the feds that suddenly we were short this, and I can't remember, I thought it was more than $10 million.
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, it's, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's 9.1 or 9.2 million. So I have a chart that shows kind of where it's been. It doesn't have 23 in it, but it's been something that's kind of been going down and then kind of up and down. And so it's in 2018 was the peak of VOCA awards. It was for Kansas. It was 29.6 million, and then it's went down to 21 was just a little over 9 million. 22 was 12.8 million. And then I don't have the 23's not on here. Oh, there we are. Good deal. Now I have the 23. It's 9.3 million projected for 23. So it's been kind of up and down, going down a little bit, but so I think they knew it was coming. I think it's something that these different advocacy groups have been dealing with, that going back and forth, and so, you know, the governor just did that swap this year.
Representative Helgerson.
Well, I don't know if the federal funds are going to come back, and I know you feel more optimistic than I do, but it probably suggests that the subcommittee needs to look at whether or not we're going to provide a permanent funding source for these agencies and this purpose, and where it should be located on a long-term basis rather than just federal funds that come in temporarily, and how, if we want to distribute it through the governor's office or somewhere else, and then figure out how we come up with the funds to fund these very needed services. You know, a couple $1 million of SGF is not a lot of money, But going back to the 10 million, that gets to be a pretty good chunk of money. And we need to have some direction, some policy. Do we want the money flowing from the governor's office, or do we want some other source of dedicated funds handling it? So I'm not making a motion, I'm just asking you and the subcommittee, come back with some idea and recommendation before we get through this.
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm not sure that if we are going to continue to increase the amount of money to these different programs into SGF, we probably do need to have a discussion on where they land. I'm not sure that they really belong in the governor's budget. They're in there simply because they have been funded by grant funds that, through the governor's budget in the last. So I think we probably do need to have that discussion on whether we're going to start moving these over into SGF on a more permanent basis, or and if we do they need to be in a different budget? So I don't know. This is just what we were given this year, and you're right. They asked, like I said, they asked for 12.6. I think it was 12.6 more when it was all added up, and we added 2.6. I think it was so. Not sure that's a great answer, but that's kind of where we are. I think it probably does need to have a more in-depth look. I'm not sure my committee is the one to more in-depth look into these because we don't know that much about these programs.
Any further discussion on the budgets? Representative Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was going to ask questions about those, and I think this conversation kind of covered what I was going to ask about. But I just might add that specifically on the CASA grant, we had discussed, they came and talked to Child Welfare Oversight and had expressed their concern for their funding because, as we have discussed in the past, that funding had not found a home yet. And so you'll notice it was not in the previous year. This is the first. So my question is, and it might already be answered, that is this where it's going to land? We had recommended that they look at the judiciary budget, and they were willing to fund it there. So I'm just wondering if you had discussion on the CASA program specifically.
Chairman Hoffman.
Yes, we actually did. That was probably the one that we had quite a bit of testimony for all of them. The CASA program in particular, there's been several CASA programs around the state that have closed due to them not having enough money to fund them. And so, yeah, they asked for, I believe, $600,000 is what their ask was. We gave them 120. And yes, this was the first year that they were in this budget, and I think it's simply due to the fact that they're getting some of that VOCA money, and yeah, they're trying to find a place to land. And I mean, I think that the judiciary probably would be a good spot, but again, I am not as familiar with these programs as others are. So,
Any further discussion in regards to fiscal year 2024? Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask on item number 2, the last line about the Finance Council meeting during the legislative session. It appears in 2024 budget as well. Are you removing it in 2024? Do we need a motion to do that?
Chairman Hoffman.
yes, we are. Are you talking about number 1?
Number 2, where we...
Oh, number 2, yes, I made that motion to remove that language.
From both? Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chairman Hoffman. Oh, Representative Landwehr.
I guess just going back to the CASA discussion is, and I'm not going to make a motion at this time, but we have got to look at something that's more sustaining with this, because these kids are in state care, and they deserve representation. And I don't think folks are taking seriously how important these CASA members are for each and every one of those kids. That is their voice, and that's their only major voice that's dedicated right to them. So, you know, perhaps as we progress on this budget, we could look at what can we do that's more sustainable, figure out a path to make this go forward, asking for it to be struggled. I know that they had bills in Fed and state over the years as they dealt with the marijuana issue and the sports gaming, blah, 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 to take some of that money to do for CASA. And we, you know, the legislature just keeps blowing that out. But this is so important to those kids. And if you talk to anyone that's got a child in foster care, they will tell you how important that is.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you. I want to second that. We were having a little discussion about it. Also, you know, number 4, it's with domestic violence and assault programs funded. We know that that has not gone down. It continues to increase. And I think we have to look at it. I guess I would have to say that maybe 6 has a little more of a priority because they are ours and because we have such a heavy volunteer program. And they stay in part of in CASA, they ask that they commit time so that there's consistency and they're working with them. So that would have a higher priority. But I think we also, if we're going to visit this down the road, we also look at domestic violence and sexual assault programs because they continue to increase. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion in regards to fiscal year 2024 as amended? Now seeing none. Chairman Hoffman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the discussion on those last, or what was it, 4, 5, and 6. I truly, you know, I'm not sure it's enough. I mean, we're really, 120,000 for CASA probably is not going to impact a lot. I totally understand. It was just simply, I was trying to keep the SGF down and wanted to give them something and thought it would at least start us the conversation on it. So hopefully we can have more conversation later. So I know I'm already in the closing. Sorry, we can talk about it later. So with that, I would move the office of governor for 2023 and 2024 as amended.
All right, committee, you've heard the formal motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Thank you, Chairman Hoffman. We're going to go ahead and move on to an update in regards to, we had some discussion in regards to the housing initiatives that were implemented in the legislative session of 2022. So I would invite Ryan Vincent, the Executive Director of the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, to give us an update. Thank you, Ryan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thanks for this opportunity to be back. I know I addressed your committee last year at a time when Kansas housing was facing emergency response with the pandemic and the ramifications on housing. A lot has happened since that time, and if you don't mind pulling up the presentation here. You've got a couple different materials in your packet. I'd encourage you to look at it. Mr. Chairman, I would just ask how much time I have for the presentation so I can make sure I fit your time constraints.
About 20 minutes.
Okay,
20, 25 minutes.
Thank you. So I will make sure I'm leaving a few minutes for questions. I know that there's lots of discussion for these important topics. I recognize that a lot of you may not be familiar with Kansas housing, the work that we do. I'm going to, oops, we're going to get our presentation back up here. Do I need to do something on the clicker here? Perfect. Thanks. There we go. I'm going to give just a 30,000-foot reminder of KHRC, our programs, but I'm mostly going to talk about the State Housing Needs Assessment, the findings that we had from that program, and really spend our time with an update on the new development resources that you all have been interested and engaged with. Some of the discussion has even happened today in this meeting. As a reminder, Kansas Housing used to be part of the Department of Commerce. We are celebrating 20 years now of unlocking home for our state. Our programs run the gamut. They serve people that are literally needing a shelter, a roof over their head, Some of the discussion you were talking about with some of those most needy populations hit home when we were talking about the work that we do at our office. So we fund domestic violence centers, homeless shelters. We provide important funding for nonprofit groups like Community Action Partners. We've got actual development programs that I'm going to be talking about here briefly. First-time homebuyer program, weatherization assistance. If you have constituents who have housing needs, please send them to Kansas Housing. I want to really focus on housing development because we wouldn't have the housing crisis we have in our state today if we didn't have an underlying systemic housing problem. We've got a variety of different wonderful programs financed through the federal government. We get tax credits from the Department of Treasury. We get funds from HUD. They're wonderful programs. They're needed, but they simply don't go far enough. And in addition, that they're limited to low and very low income households. These are people that generally make, for a household of four, less than $40,000 a year. So there's a big gap. There's folks that make too much to qualify for the affordable housing programs that we administer, but they don't make enough to rent, to buy. These are our teachers. These are our police officers, our firefighters, the people that we need for our communities to be successful. You all recognize that by creating a moderate income housing program, or MIH program you hear referred to periodically. This program is run through cities and counties. We give grants and loans to these cities and counties in rural communities under 60,000 population. It can be used for infrastructure. It can be used for housing development activities. Got just a couple of pictures I'll show you of a few of the developments we've been able to finance both through our traditional programs and then the MIH program. This particular property is in Representative Howell's district. This is the historic Lee Lofts building in Salina. It's a nice example of how we can put some necessary money investment in housing that can be available when we have employers like Tony's Pizza, like Great Plains Manufacturing, like Russell Stover that's trying to expand their operations, but they need homes for their jobs to go at night. But in addition to the housing, we were part of the downtown revitalization of Salina. We were able to save a historic structure where Lee Jeans started. You can still see the blue dye on the floor in some of these units. These are our story for our state, and this is our chance to save these historic projects. In addition to Lee Lofts, here's a property in McPherson, Representative Mason's district, maybe? I'm trying to remember. But this particular property is just a nice example of the type of financing that we can do for households with disabilities, for seniors. Rural and urban areas alike benefit from these programs. This is a development in Alma, the upper story of right above City Hall. Nice example how there was a vacant building sitting empty. It used to be a skating rink. You can still see where the kids' hands were rubbed off all the paint on the pillars over the years. But we were able to turn it into 7 units of housing. There's now a teacher that lives in this beautiful property. There's now a city worker. We're able to provide this much-needed workforce housing that you hear about from your constituents each and every week. Taking a step back, I'll just remind you that KHRC has been responding to emergencies. We just provided over 80,000 Kansans with emergency rental assistance to keep them in their homes. That program is winding down with nearly it has wound down with nearly $290 million out the door. We've served and made whole over 11,000 landlords. Meanwhile, our Kansas Housing Assistance Fund, or CAF program, is also winding down. We've got about $10 million left, or even less at this point. So if you're aware of constituents that are facing foreclosure, please send them our way. Zooming out, though, I mentioned the Kansas Housing Needs Assessment. We haven't had a housing study done in our state in 30 years since the Finney administration. Our office worked with a variety of stakeholder partners, from realtors to bankers to community leaders to the League of Municipalities. We completed a year-long housing process and study. We had over 70 listening sessions, over 4,000 survey respondents. We compiled the list of findings. They're on our website. There's great information on your districts that you can learn about what the vacancy rates are, what the rehab needs are of your communities, what kind of the household composition you may have in your communities. Very much encourage you to check that out. But that housing study led to the historic investments that you all made in housing this last session. KHRC and the state of Kansas historically has only received $2 million for housing development. That's 69 cents per Kansan per year. But you all addressed that this last year when you passed $62 million for our moderate income housing program that I just spoke about. 20 million of that came from ARPA and the rest came from SGF. There were also two new tax pieces. There was a affordable housing tax credit and a Kansas housing investor tax credit. These are all tools. These are all pots of funds that we work with local communities, with local developers to be able to get housing built in your communities. Finally, we were able to launch a new rural home loan guarantee program that I will touch on each one of these very briefly. Before I do, though, I want you to know that we took the time to learn and to listen and to respond to the input that your constituents, our constituents, provided us. We were in every neck of the wood from May to June, all through the summer. We had a variety of different listening sessions. We had webinars with lots of different stakeholder partners. That's important, and it provided us needed feedback that we were able to use in the final rules for these various programs that we launched. So an update now on where we're at with these new resources. Our request for proposal for the moderate income housing program was launched in July. We received a 74% increase in applications the first round, requesting 300% more in revenue, or in grants, showing that people are aware of this new resource and that there is a huge need for it. Similarly, I'm trying to get this to advance here. Here's just a graph just showing that uptick. I just learned that our next round is due on Friday of this week, and we will be getting 90 applications for the housing investor tax credit and for the MIH program. Again, there's a massive need, and we all, I say we as in you collectively, have helped us get the word out that this new resource is out there and that Kansas development is back to work. We're attracting builders, we're attracting developers, both within the state and outside of the state. They're building up their capacity. The pipeline is moving forward to get new homes in action here. Here's a map just showing where we've gotten applications. Some of these communities where you all represent can be some of the most difficult communities to serve, especially these very small rural communities. We've gotten a great turnout and interest for these new funds. We've had webinars for the developers, for builders. We've heard about new land contracts that have been entered into so that this new pipeline continues to move forward. Every 4 months now, we're getting new requests for proposals out to make sure that these dollars are hitting the ground. So, as of the end of this calendar year, we had awarded $7.6 million in Kansas housing investor tax credits. We have awarded over $7 million in moderate income housing for a total of at least 200 new homes. We do have a complete list of awardees on our website. The links are embedded in this presentation that you all have. Just want to highlight a couple quotes from developers. One is this Justin Pagant from Atchison. He took the old historic YMCA building there and was able to renovate it into beautiful moderate income housing. That building was going to be raised. I had a legislator tell me that he went to preschool in this building, but because of this investment, we were able to help downtown Atchison with their revitalization. We've got employers who are able to expand because they've got homes for their workers. I quote, he says that nobody in small towns in rural Kansas is building in this income group without assistance. The dollars you give us are being leveraged $3 to $5 to $7 for every $1 that we use of state investment. I'm hearing stories from Sterling. I'm hearing stories from Iola that we actually have people who are getting MIH grants. They're getting their feet wet with new housing development. They're learning the rules. They're making the partners, and they're coming back and they're doing market rate housing in those communities just because of the investment that we made as a state. That's a success for our state. Next quote is from Jeremiah Johnson. He's doing a development right now that's being funded through our program in Carbondale. He reminds us that it costs the exact same to build a house in Carbondale as a house in Kansas City. The only difference is the land cost. So programs like these are important to try to get done to get down to where the community can support what we're doing. So we've got these nice developers who are growing their operations because of the investment that you all have made. Quick update on this home loan guarantee program. We just launched this in January. This recognizes that in rural communities, that in your districts often, that it may cost $200,000 to build a home, but it will immediately appraise at $150,000. That $50,000 gap means that banks won't loan. And if banks don't loan, that means that people don't end up building homes. There's no new homes being built in communities. There's no comparables for appraisals, which lead to these lending issues. This new program now allows us to guarantee the gap, that $50,000 gap in the example I just gave you. KHRC guarantees the gap. The bank's able to make the loan. The home is able to be built. There's new homes being built, so there's new comparables for future appraisals. It's a win-win-win. That's the home loan guarantee program. These are the counties it serves under the statute that you all passed. Very much encourage you to get the word out to your constituents that we have this resource available. Lastly, just a reminder that we did get some new tax credits passed. Those are moving very quickly. We've gone through a public input process on those as well. Just want to show you the number of new applications we're getting for that particular program as well. We're also able to use the federal private activity bond allocation, which is an important subject. So we're utilizing a federal resource with this program because of the tax credits that you all passed. So I've thrown a lot of information at you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm most happy to just field your questions at this point. You know, there's a lot of good things happening and a lot of growth in our state. I'm really looking forward to the next year coming back and reporting to you on the actual housing that's getting built. But happy to field any questions you have at this time.
All right, thank you, Ryan. So the first question I want to ask is, in your comments, you said the cost of a home in Carbondale and a cost of a home in Kansas City is the same aside from the land value. But there's also another difference, and that would be the market value or the appraised value after the home is built. So can you kind of explain that?
Absolutely, Representative. And that really goes to that point I made about the rural loan guarantee program as well, that you know, the challenge with some of these smaller communities, that there may not have been housing built in the last 20, 30 years. And the smaller the community, the older the housing can generally be. Our housing study actually showed that there's communities in north central and southeast Kansas where the median age of the housing stock is from the 1930s. So because of that, there's just not a lot of new comparables for appraisals, for county appraisers to use. So they're using old housing that may not reflect the cost of construction today. We all know the cost of lumber, the cost of contractors has gone up dramatically. And there's a lot of inflationary pressure. So the cost keeps going up. The appraised value is down here, and that's why there's this gap. Because of that, the market is simply not functioning. But something like our loan guarantee program or being able to subsidize the actual development cost through like the moderate income housing program or some of these other resources help the market function. Our long-term hope is that once there's new homes being built, then there's those future comparables, there's no longer appraisal issues, and we have the needed workforce housing that virtually every community in our state needs.
Well, and I would say, I spent a lot of time in Representative Howe's district a couple weeks ago, and especially on Santa Fe Avenue in Salina, and personally saw the development that was done with the Lee Lofts, and I have to say it is a spectacular renovation of that building on Santa Fe Avenue in Salina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is beautiful. We just awarded a second phase to that development. And I'll tell you, I've had these intense meetings with the employer sector in Salina, and they're saying that we have got to do something about the housing situation, that you can throw all the economic development dollars through the Department of Commerce or through tax incentives, but ultimately if there's no homes for these jobs to go at night, then these folks are still having to drive in, and it's inhibiting the ability of our rural communities to grow. By making the types of investments you're all making, it is paying big dividends. In the short run, it's paying dividends because, of course, with new construction comes immediate jobs. It also comes with, increased tax revenue for schools and for communities and for the local government. But more long term, we know that if people are able to expand their business operations, if people aren't having to drive from Nebraska or Oklahoma or Colorado, then they're spending their money they're schooling their kids in our local communities. So it's really fueling the future of our rural communities as well as our urban ones as well.
Last week, the realtors were here, and I had a discussion with some from my district. And is there more of an emphasis with your agency in regards to multifamily buildings, or their preference would be more single-family homes?
Another great question, Mr. Chairman. And I would say that, we recognize that there is no one housing solution for all of our needs in the state. Our state's housing study really did a lot of analysis on that, and it doesn't matter whether it's a rural community, an urban area. It doesn't matter which area of the state, that every community has different housing needs. That's the beauty of the moderate income housing program, is that we at KHRC and we at the state level are not telling local communities what their housing solution is. The local community is having those conversations, they're identifying their needs, they're applying to us with those needs, and we're able to fund because you've all given us the flexibility to meet those needs. The majority of our federal programs that we administer do fund multifamily housing. That's because of the different rules that come with the programs. We do have a down payment assistance program that's funded through the federal government that's just in the rural communities that we administer. We also have the number of different rural programs that you all have funded, a number of which also work for single family. But there is need across the gamut, and we welcome any resources and direction that you give us for how to use those resources.
So that kind of leads to my next question. So we started last year with the $20 million revolving loan program, and I believe there's been a request for an additional $20 million in the budgets that we've been discussing. So can you please elaborate on that request?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So, I don't think it's a mystery to anyone that development takes time. So while we'd love to come to you 6 months after getting the first batch of funding and say we have the housing built, we're not there yet. What we see is a huge amount of interest, a huge amount of demand, and we're moving forward getting these dollars out the door. However, we had the Kansas Housing Association give a presentation to the House Rural Caucus here recently, and they said that, it'll take 3 to 5 years to get that new housing built. But it's a pipeline, and that pipeline is well underway. A couple things, though, that are essential for us to be able to continue the pipeline. One is that we need to make sure that if there are excess funds available during the good times, that we have them available to show a sustained, committed funding for long-term housing development in our state during the rainy days. The second thing is that we want to show developers and builders and contractors in our state that we are committed to addressing our state's housing needs, because we're competing. We're competing with the same state. We're trying to draw the same developers that Colorado and Oklahoma and even maybe Johnson County within our state are trying to draw. Obviously, we need to meet Johnson County's housing needs too, but our whole state has these massive underlying housing needs. By showing that we're able to put aside a little bit of money periodically to fund our state housing trust fund, like virtually every other state that is in this surrounding area, we're going to be able to compete for those developers and those builders. We're going to be able to get those housing units built. The only other thing I might mention is that the new $20 million will actually expand the number of eligible communities. So that won't affect the rural communities that are already being served, but it also opens up some of these new resources to more urban areas that have their own needs as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bisson. Committee, are there any questions for Ryan? All right. Seeing none, you're very thorough in your presentation.
Well,
and thank you for being here, and we're probably going to have you again to give us another update.
Sounds great. Thank you all.
All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and open for final action on House Bill 2191. And if you recall, when we had the bill hearing on that, that was the authorization of the Children's Cabinet to form a 501c3 for fundraising purposes for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library book gifting program. Are there any discussion or amendments to House Bill 2191? Seeing none, I would make a motion that we pass out favorably House Bill 2191, and due to the fact that it's not a controversial nature, to have it placed on the consent calendar, seconded by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Committee, that is all we have for today, and we are going to be back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So until then, we are adjourned.